Patrick Fenaro here, co-founder of VetaBiz and Visa Franchise. You have Jared Taylor joining me today, who's the president of Amazing Athletes. Jared, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Patrick. I appreciate it.
It seems like you've worn quite a few hats in the real estate industry, being a franchisee of a franchise brand now that you're the president of. Can you tell me a little bit about your path and what led to now running a significant franchise organization?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been a bit of a transition for sure. Right out of college, I got into real estate and found a niche in the market with foreclosure properties, which, as you can imagine, 2008, 2009, 2010 was really, really booming with those foreclosure listings that we were doing. And so the market recovered though, right? So we ended up, not having as many properties coming over. So kind of found myself at a crossroads as to what do I want to do? Do I want to continue to try to do foreclosures as that well was running dry, or do I want to work with buyers and sellers like most normal real estate agents do? And I just decided that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I got to talking to a friend of mine that was an acquaintance through some of the real estate business. And he asked me a very pointed question. What do you enjoy? What are you passionate about? I said,
Yeah.
well, I'm passionate about sports, but I don't really want to go back to, school to get a secondary education degree and become a teacher and a coach and all that. That just wasn't something I was interested in. Long story short on that, he presented an opportunity for me to become a partner in this Amazing Athletes franchise that he had purchased. And so I decided to do that. And so we started out in January 2014 with me running operations on the business. About 8 months later, I made the decision that I wanted to buy him out.
That's
It
pretty
ended up
fast.
being this every 2 year kind of plan. So I started with one unit, and then 2 years later I bought another unit. 2 years later I bought another unit. But early on, kind of the evolution of that as an owner, and then leading up to the president role, it's just really been a transition of being really focused on the kids early on, because early on it was me and just me. And so I was doing all the coaching, I was doing the marketing, I was doing the sales, I was doing the accounting, I was everything, right? And so really early on it was all about the kids, but as we started adding more coaches and growing the business, then it kind of became more about the business. I wasn't teaching as many classes, so I was really focused on the business and the growth. The mindset was still the same, right? We want to impact as many kids as possible, so we want to grow the business. But then as I became the largest franchise in the system with 6 units, I started to realize that I had some knowledge that I could pass on to other franchisees. And so I found myself answering a lot of questions and fielding phone calls and that sort of thing. And so I talked with our executive team about potentially adding in what became the enhanced coaching or business success coaching. And so I started doing that. So I started traveling out to work with other franchisees as soon as they came on board, trying to help them get up and running and that sort of thing. And so transition to me actually selling my franchise units, as we talked about, a few minutes ago offline, really focused in on my faith as a Christian. I'm always trying to follow the promptings that I feel like the Lord is leading me to. And so my prayer was always that when he wants me to do something different, he'll bring me a buyer. And so one of my managers came to me and said, hey, I'd be interested in buying the franchise if you're ever interested in selling. And so we started having a conversation about it, and we worked out a deal. I really had no idea what I was going to do next. I knew that I enjoyed working with those franchisees because, like I said, early it was about the kids, then it became about the business, and then it became about helping the other franchisees. And so in the conversation where I was telling our owner, John, that I was going to sell the business, he said, well, what are you going to do next? I said, well, I don't really know, but I'll have a little bit of money coming in from this sale, so I'm okay. And he, in that conversation, said, well, what would you think about becoming the president of Amazing Athletes? And I was like, okay. Wasn't even on my radar, and then as we start talking more about the responsibilities of it, I started realizing that it was really, the job itself was really in line with what I had kind of already been doing. I'd already
Yeah.
been talking with franchisees and helping them, to try to grow their business and that sort of thing. And so it's a really long story to tell you the transition of real estate over to president of Amazing Athletes.
It obviously seems like you have like a giver mentality in terms of like whether it's giving to the kids, giving to your management team at the franchisee level, and then expanding the units, or giving to other franchisees in the system. But are other franchisees like that? Is that kind of like a core value of what it's like being an Amazing Athletes franchisee and being in that ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that's what we look for. I think we look for people who, are givers more than takers. We've got a good group of people, and Everybody's usually willing to share knowledge. As far as our parent company, Youth Athletes United, we have multiple brands underneath our parent company. So we've also got a soccer program, and then we've also got a tennis and golf program. And I think between having franchisees across three different systems, I think we do a really good job of meshing together and partnering together on things. And so I would say, yeah, that's definitely part of the culture with Amazing Athletes and Youth Athletes United for sure.
Jared, what does the business entail? What can a franchisee operating Amazing Athletes franchise expect day to day?
Yeah, so I mean, day to day, it really depends on how you want to run it. Some want to run it with a general manager, kind of helping them run things. But most of our franchisees are in the business. They'll start out with just themselves. They'll build their business up a little bit. They'll start to hire coaches and they'll start to grow. We talk about the race to replace yourself, and that's kind of what franchisees are going to expect when they come into our system is to get out there and work and really try to grow the business, organically by yourself, probably to start with, and then, expanding from there.
In a few sentences, what is the business?
It is an educational sports enrichment program that focuses on the development of the whole child through the vehicle of 10 different sports. So it's a sports enrichment program for kids ages 18 months up to about 12 years old that focuses on teaching 10 different sports to the kids and again, focusing on that whole development of a child.
Very cool. And how did you select those sports, or why is it still the 10 sports and it's not less or more?
I think that it's the main sport. The 10 sports that we do, I think, are the main sports that you're going to see. There are some other programs out there that may advertise 20 sports or something like that. But you probably, if you started to sit down and think about it, it'd be hard for you to name 20 sports right off the top of your head. There's just some of them are just activities. Some of them are just hobbies or games that you play on the beach and that sort of thing. The 10 sports that we do, and it was 9 sports for probably the first 6 or 7 years that I was involved, and we added track and field a couple of years ago to get us to the
Nice.
10 sports. And I like to tell people that the 10 sports that we do are the relevant sports. They're pretty much across the country. All 10 sports are relevant to your area that you live in. For me personally, there's really 9. Our kids are not going to, in South Carolina, our kids are not going to grow up and play ice hockey, in high school. It's just not going to happen. They might have field hockey at some of the larger high schools, but, they're not going to play ice hockey. But the other 9 sports are really, really relevant. And then, of course, when you get up north, ice hockey is very relevant. So it's really the 10 relevant sports that your children are potentially going to be able to play as they grow and get up into the school system.
And I can see in terms of enrollment, like, 18 to say what, 7 years, you're not really competing with the youth leagues as much, but you would know more like 6 years old to 12 years. Like, I guess the parents have a few different options. Like, why go with an Amazing Athletes program versus like what might be offered through the local police
Yeah,
organization
sure.
or
So, I mean, if you think about the age ranges that we work with, we've got our TOTS program, which is 18 months to 2.5. And then our Amazing Athletes
that's
program is that 2.5 to, 5 years old, which would be that point at which the kids actually transition out of a preschool environment and into an elementary type school environment or private school. And so, to your point, when they get to that age range, that's when they really start those rec leagues and those competitive leagues. Our program is non-competitive, so our goal is to teach those children the basic fundamentals of the sport and let them experience 10 different sports so that as they get to that age that you just spoke about, they kind of have an idea of what they enjoy and what they want to play as they get a little bit older. And it's really a cool thing within the preschool structure because the parents are already taking the kids to the same place that they were going to be taking them, already, right? They're not having to drive them out to the ball fields. They're not having to drive them out to, the local gym or wherever. They're driving them to preschool, which is right where they were going to be driving them to anyway that morning. And while they're there, they're getting that sports fix that, maybe the younger kids aren't getting, but maybe an older sibling is getting it. Mom, why can't I play baseball? Well, you're not old enough yet. Well, this kind of solves that problem for those parents. So it's a really cool program.
and so I can imagine the schools are a huge, advocate partner in all this.
Absolutely. I mean, they're our partners, and they're allowing us to come into their facilities. They're trusting us to work with their kids, and so they do a really good job of pushing our programming. I was on a call today with a partner location, and they are all about enrichment programs. And maybe it's not just sports. Maybe it's karate. Maybe it's STEM. Maybe it's gymnastics or dance or whatever the case may be. But their philosophy as an organization is they want to develop that whole child. And so they bring in as many enrichment programs as they can and, push those programs out to their parents. And the parents, of course, get to choose what they want to do. But that's the whole goal of this particular partner is they want to develop the whole child, and bringing other programs in is their way of enhancing what they're already teaching the kids and expanding on that whole development of the child.
And I'd imagine there's a bit of a competitive mode against like mom and pops, like where it'd be hard to get into a school if you're just operating as like some random company that was formed a year ago, as opposed to running with the Amazing Athletes banner.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it definitely helps having, 20 plus years of experience and success and programming designed. That definitely helps. I've seen some mom and pops and you look at their website and it's just not, it's not something you want to, you want to work with. And as a parent, as a baseball guy, I saw a website one time where, the child is posing for a picture on their website and he's holding the bat cross-handed. And it's like, you really have to know what you're doing. You really have to, you really have to be zoned in on the programming and what you're teaching and teaching it the correct way. Cause I'll be honest with you, we've had, professional athletes, kids in our programs. And if the Major League Baseball player's child comes home and they're showing dad what they learned at,
Yeah,
class that day and they're holding the bat cross-handed, then that Major League Baseball player is going to look at it and say, "What are these guys doing? We got to get out of this program." So that's one of the things that's really really great about Amazing Athletes. We got a really good group of people who really know what they're doing. They focus on the curriculum. They focus on doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. So yeah, you do run into that competition. But as you said, being under the banner of Amazing Athletes with 20 plus years of experience is really beneficial to our franchisees when they walk in the door. And quite often you'll find a franchisee that'll walk into a door and that director's already heard of Amazing Athletes, because these directors run in the same circles a lot of times, or they've moved from a different town, and so there's been several times where I've walked in and the director said, "Oh yeah, I already know about you guys. You don't even have to tell me anything. Yep, let's do it."
let's
So
do
it's
it.
it's a really cool thing when that happens.
And then on the other spectrum, I'd imagine like, are there corporate competitors? Like, are there any companies that are like hiring coaches like throughout the country?
Yeah, there's definitely some other multi-sport programs. There's also a lot of single sport programs. There are there's soccer programs out there. There are multi-sport, multi-activity programs that just kind of dabble in the sports. And then there's also your karate programs, your gymnastics programs. There's a lot of different a lot of different programs out there, and there's a market for each one, right? But we focus on the multi-sport area, and it's worked really well for us.
And I would imagine like the lifetime of a client of a student's like much longer in the multi-sport, where like I know I did with musical instruments or martial arts like karate, just like 6 months and then it's done. Where if you have like sports to rotate,
Yeah, a lot of the single sport programs run in sessions. So an 8 week session or a 10 week session. A lot of times, um, we being multi sport, like you said, we teach two sports a week. They're divided
nice.
into the ball sports and the stick sports essentially. And so we do one ball sport and one stick sport every week in our classes. So this week might be football and baseball, but next week's going to be basketball and lacrosse. So it's this constant churning of the sports that always keeps it fresh, always keeps it exciting. And you don't have that same thing every week that you do with just a like a single sport or a single activity type program.
I was going to ask you about lacrosse because I grew up in Northern Virginia and I played lacrosse in college, and I wasn't sure if it was going to make that list of the top 10, but the sport's grown like wildfire. And I think it's amazing, like for hand-eye coordination, muscle control, like also just like making decisions quickly.
It's really growing. It's for us in the South. We didn't hear about it until 10 years ago, really. But it's really growing here, and it is one of the 10 sports. And it's. I read a quote the other day by Coach Godwin, I think is his name, at East Carolina University. He's the baseball coach there, and he was talking about how if he's recruiting a kid, just a kid who's been focused on baseball their entire life, and then they've got another kid who's played multiple sports their entire life, he will recruit the multiple sport kid because of what you just said. They focused on so many different things with the multiple sports, and they know how to compete in different ways. And so that's actually more attractive to him than that child who's actually focused on one sport. And I think that's one of the things that's really great about multisports, is that it does, like you said, it
Cross training.
focuses. Yeah, it cross trains you. My niece last year decided, she's 14, and she decided for the first time that she wanted to play softball. She had been playing volleyball her entire life. And she went out. Now, she wasn't the best hitter on the team, but she caught everything that was thrown to her because, that hand-eye coordination that was needed with volleyball was the exact same thing that she needed for playing the field. And so they actually had her at first base. She's 14, never played softball a day in her life, and she's out there playing first base because she can catch everything that was thrown to her. And so it's one of those really cool things, to your point about, the crossover between the skills that are needed for the different sports.
And then for parent, like it took me too long to realize lacrosse was kind of the sport that I could thrive in, where I wish I could like found that earlier to get the six skills set and like being able to advance further, where I'm sure you see with a lot of parents, like I got into a better university because of lacrosse. That if I didn't have lacrosse, I probably wouldn't have gotten into that school. And I've seen that a lot with family members, peer groups, where sports help you get into a better university or you're able to get a scholarship because of the sport. But you might not know that your child's going to be good at that set sport unless they really try them all.
Yeah, for sure. And that's to your point. When I was growing up, we had four sports at our local high school. I went to a small school. We had four sports. We had football, basketball, baseball, and track and field. And I played football, basketball, and baseball. That was what I knew. That was what my dad, you know, pushed me to, because that was what he knew.
Yeah.
And the only reason I probably didn't run track and do track and field was because it overlapped with baseball season. And so you end up kind of zoning in on those things. But with the multi-sport of 10 different sports, and with them all being relevant now, it really helps that child identify early on what sport or sports that they enjoy the most. And then, like you said, it kind of funnels up to that. Whereas, if you'd have had an Amazing Athletes type program when you were a child, you may have found lacrosse at 3 or 4 years old, as
Yeah.
opposed to later, and it could have been even more beneficial to you.
Or you get funneled into like one position because you're an amazing athlete and you were really good at football, but you only started playing lacrosse at 14. You're
Right.
playing defense, like you're not playing attack. And then I guess a lot of the attraction of amazing athletes is, it's not a physical location, a retail location, brick and mortar, where the clients are coming to you. And if you choose the wrong location, you're kind of screwed for the tenor of the franchise agreement. Where for your type of business, if it's not working at that school, like there's a bunch of other schools to go out and try to build programs with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have one franchisee who has a brick and mortar retail location. He's worked through some different models and different things like that, and kind of found that the subscription based type model is really working well for him. He's actually also expanded into some after school programming as an after school provider. But to your point, I mean, that's one out of many franchisees who have just one retail location. And that's one of the things that's exciting about it for a lot of people. It's low cost entry because there is no brick and mortar. You don't have to invest those types of funds into it. It's mobile. So you're not stuck in the same place all day, every day. And to your point, if you find a location that's not working out, then you just move on to the next location. And again, provides the flexibility of travel, of your days, pretty flexible, and there's a lot of freedom within the structure of ownership within this franchise. So that's one of the things that's really attractive to people.
What are we talking about in terms of all in cost to get one up and going, including the working capital?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as franchise fees for one unit, it's going to run you about roughly $50,000, and then you'll have, depending on how many sets of equipment and marketing materials and that sort of thing that you buy, you're probably looking at spending another $5K or something like that, just on a sports equipment bag to teach all the sports. And then if you pretty quickly have success and need to hire a coach, then you're probably going to be buying another set of equipment. So, but just in general, roughly around 50K is going to get you in there and get you started.
Okay. What a better way to be doing the job first, and it's something that most people are going to enjoy if they're in this space. So then to hire a coach and having gone through it all before. That's a lot easier than a lot of these other businesses.
Yeah, you really got to find your spot as a coach, and you've got to find your personality as a coach. someone mentioned the other day about us being performers. And I was like, yeah, we absolutely are performers, because I may be coaching a class and, I'm working with the kids and, they throw a ball or they hit a ball, hit a volleyball, and I take it off the head. And then now all of a sudden I've got a British accent and, you find those things that work for you. And then you try to teach those things to your coaches as well. Now they're not all going to do it the same way, but they're going to find what works for them and what makes their class fun. So we're definitely performers. We've got to keep our classes fun and engaging while also teaching them, the right way to do the sports, like I said just a minute ago. And it's a really cool thing to see coaches and owners collaborate. I mean, I've learned many things throughout the years from my coaches about different things that they do to, engage their class and that sort of thing. And so it's a really cool engagement between the coaches and the owners. And at the end of the day, nobody's ever going to do it like the owner does it because they own the business. And so you really it works a lot better if you get in there first, and really learn what you're
Builds
doing. That way you
credibility.
can teach everybody else to do it.
And in terms of monetization, how does that work? Like, and what goals is it kind of like put your head down and get like 3 schools onboarded? How do you go about that kind of ramp up? And how do they make money at the end of the day?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple different ways that they make money. Most of it is going to be parent paid. So we go out to a preschool or even an open enrollment location, elementary school, whatever it is. You find the location, you get them to agree to let you utilize their facilities and market to their families.
Do
And
you have to pay for that? Do you pay the preschool some fee?
from time to time we do. Sometimes
Okay.
there's a rental fee. Sometimes there's a rev share or something like that. From time to time we
Nice.
do. Ideally, the location sees the value that you're bringing
Yeah.
to their program, and they won't do that, but sometimes they do. And we just do what we have to do and make it work. And
Sure.
but we go in and teach the classes. The parents will sign up for the program if it's a parent pay, if they want to. If they don't, then of course they don't have to. And then some locations bring us in on what we call a contracted basis, where essentially, kind of the best way to describe it to you would be that they bring us in as a PE provider, so to speak. And we go in and we teach the class and we just cycle through all of their classrooms and teach every child in the school. And so that's really the two
Love
main
that.
models within the school structure. But then we've got, you could have open enrollment at a Parks and Rec location. You could have elementary schools, a lot of different ways that we could do it.
And like, what metrics should the franchisee be focused on, whether it's daily, weekly, to make sure that their business is growing in a profitable manner?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're just focused on margins. You've got to make sure that you've got a certain number of kids if it's a parent paid program. And you've also got to factor in whether you're hiring a coach. Of course, we always try to tell our franchisees, hey, hopefully one day you're going to grow to where you're not the coach. So when you're pricing these things out, do so as if you're going to be hiring a coach to teach that class. And so you're looking at those margins. You've got a certain number of kids that you need in a parent pay, and then you're going to look at varying factors on the contracted side. Obviously, you're going to do probably more bulk with a contracted deal. So then you start working off of a per hour cost or a per class or per coach cost, however you want to do it. But those are the things that you're looking for, and you've got your margins that you're shooting for. So if you get there, you take the gig, and if you can't make it work, you can't make it work. But there's a lot of different ways that you can get creative and try to make those numbers work. If a location wants to do a contract and they can't afford to do 4 classes out of a month, maybe you can work something out where they do it 1 week, or maybe you take the entirety of their enrollment and break it out over 4 weeks to make it work out to where it's 1 week. So there's a lot of different ways that you can make it work to hit those metrics that you're looking for.
And I'm sure going to you as a franchisor, going to fellow franchisees, you can kind of collaborate on different pricing, invoicing terms, and how to make it work, as you
Yeah,
said.
and speaking back to the culture, it's a really cool thing, and I encourage our franchisees all the time. We utilize Slack as our in office
Oh yeah.
messaging system, and so we've got channels on there where people, if they have a success story that they've never heard anybody else mention, they'll get in the Slack channel, they'll post it, and they'll say, "Hey, here's what I did. Maybe you guys want to try this out." And it's a really cool thing when that happens because we learn something new, all the time from our franchisees that we never thought to do. And it's like, oh wow, that's a brilliant idea. We should push that out to the system. And so we do a lot of that sort of thing with collaborating with franchisees and having them work together and sharing ideas.
And then in terms of the operation, is it pretty flexible and lean? Like, are the coaches part of a cost of goods sold? Do you pay them, only if there's work, or do you have to keep them on full time? How does that work?
Most of our coaches would be what I call full-time, part-time, if that makes any sense at all. A full-time coach for us would still be a part-time employee. They're going to get, 20 to 25 hours a week if they're working a full schedule. That's going to be pretty much every morning and every afternoon because you've got that time, at least with the preschools, you've got that time in the middle of the day where they're eating lunch and they're taking naps and you just can't get in the building. And so a full-time, part-time coach, they're at the end of the day, they're a part-time employee. But if they're teaching a full-time schedule for us, that would mean mornings and afternoons. And ideally, you're going to have coaches who can work Monday through Friday, that morning time and that afternoon time. And then that way you're not buying additional sets of equipment that you are just tying up for somebody who can work one day a week or something like that. So ideally, that's what we're looking for.
What was your headcount like when you had those 6 franchise locations?
We had about 13 coaches total and then 2 managers that were, kind of just they're filling in. They're also, doing running paperwork and that sort of thing and helping out with scheduling and that sort of thing. So you kind of get to this point to where you realize that you can't do all the managerial things yourself and you need some help. So you can either, you could hire somebody to do it full time as a salaried employee if you, feel that you can afford that or that you have the work for them, or you could take one of your better coaches who, has the, shows responsibility and that sort of thing. And you could give them some additional tasks to kind of fill that void that they have midday in those hours. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. And everybody does it a little bit different.
And once you as the owner are kind of out of that day-to-day coaching role, is the best use of time on sales
Yes.
and getting new schools?
Yes. And I learned this from Craig Groeschel, the pastor of Life Church. He has a leadership podcast that he does.
I have to
I
listen to
figured
that.
out, and I think Maxwell says it as well, but when you are constantly in the classroom and you're constantly have to get, you're getting sucked back into the classroom, you kind of become the lid on your organization, right? So you can't go out and sell anymore because you're constantly getting sucked back into the classroom. And so that's one of those things the manager does. You could also hire an assistant coach that just kind of bounces around. But if a coach leaves, somebody's got to fill that void that they left. And if it's you, then you're not doing sales calls. You don't have that margin to go and get more schools, because if you've got a full coaching schedule with all your coaches, then you don't really have the time to go sell, and you don't have the time in the coaches schedules to fill in those schools that you did sell. So if you continually get sucked back into the classroom, then you, like I said, you kind of become the lid on your organization.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of the owner focusing mostly on sales. I think for most businesses, at least the $1 million mark, where maybe up until 100K, you're more, you're the technician too, and you fulfill the service.
Yep,
But your best use of time, and in most cases, no one's going to sell as well as the owner,
for
the
sure.
passion and the drive.
Well, and you also have to be the face of the organization too, right? Because you are in a community and you have to be a part of the community. And so you've got to constantly be communicating with your directors, your parents, the kids, obviously, and then even other programs that are in the area. You could collaborate with them in some different ways. And I tell our franchisees during our new franchisee training, there's 3 D's that we don't want to do. We don't want to disappoint, we don't want to disengage, and we don't want to disappear. So, disappoint, you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. You don't want to disengage, because when you disengage with with your coaches or with the parents or with the school, then they feel unimportant. And then if you disappear, if you're the face of the organization and then you just don't show up anymore, then they kind of get to this point where, like, I got a problem, but I don't even know who to call. I got a problem that, the coach didn't do something right, or I feel like the coach should be more engaging or whatever. I don't even know who to call.
Yeah.
So you can't
You
disappear.
put them in a weird situation that they're just going to let the contract end out instead
Yeah.
of hashing it out with you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, you always, like I said, I always wanted to be the face. I always wanted to constantly be checking in with my schools. If I'm in an area, doing some sales calls and I've got a school right down the road, I may pop in and say, hey, I don't need anything. I just wanted to say, hey, and see how you guys are doing. Is there any way that I can make this experience better for you? And so those are all the
I
different
love it.
things that, we tell our franchisees, hey, just don't disappear. Be the face of your franchise, because you're the face of your franchise.
Jared, is there anything that we didn't talk about today that you think would be relevant for prospective franchisees?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the franchise system, there's the system, right? And there's a reason that it's a franchise. It's because the system works. And I read a great quote. I don't know the guy. His name is David Floyd. He's with the Perfect Franchise, but I read a quote on LinkedIn. He said the key differentiator for successful franchisees is they follow and they fully utilize the systems. And he even used an acronym for the word system. Save yourself significant time, energy, and money. And that was his point, was to follow the system. And there's so much truth in that. This is a 20-year-old franchise. When I started 10 years ago, we were still writing out handwritten newsletters. And today we're sending everything digitally. There are so many more tools that are available to us now that there weren't when I first started. But the general system itself is the same. You go out and you sell the schools, you sell the parents, you teach the kids. And it's those three things that are still 20 years later, the lifeblood of the business.
Yes.
So there are some technological things and those sorts of things that change, but the system is still the same. It's been successful. And the reason it's been successful is because people have followed the system. So for prospective franchisees, I would just say, follow your system.
I think that's well suited. Got to choose the right system, but if you choose the right system and it's been validated and the time it's proven, then that's what you signed up for.
Yeah,
And if
for
you
sure.
want to do your own youth enrichment program, then that's on you. And if you don't see the value, then don't sign up with a franchise. But I do see that, and disgruntled franchisees often think that they can do it better, or they think they have something that's going to work better. But I think a lot of it is checking your ego and just focusing on what is proven
For
to
sure.
work, and that is focusing on, in this case, selling the schools, selling the teachers. So Jared, tell me, what's the best way for someone to get in contact if they're looking to explore your franchise system further?
Yeah, so they can visit our website, amazingathletes.com. There's some opportunities to click on a link to become a franchisee, or just Google how to become an Amazing Athletes franchisee. You should find some information there. Paul Loudermilch is our director of franchise sales, and he will get in touch with you and start that process. And then once you kind of go through the process, you'll run into me, and we'll get you trained up and get you up and running. We've got good coverage throughout the country, but we still got some really good pockets that we need to fill. We need some franchisees in San Antonio. We need somebody in Birmingham and Chattanooga, and we'll name all the different places. But if you're in any of those areas, you
Good
like working with
markets.
kids, and you like having fun and teaching about sports, then give us a call.
Jared, thanks so much for joining, and we'll definitely be sure to include a link to your website for anyone to reach out that's interested in potentially investing and opening their own Amazing Athletes franchise.
Sounds great. Thank you,
Thanks.
Patrick.